Geopolitically, where are we right now, and what does this proxy operation in Syria mean? Again, I mean, where is all this going with Iran, October surprise, the whole ball of wax?
Recapping on Syria, Syria is the main objective right now towards the overall objective of taking down Iran. And the reason Syria must be taken down first is because it has most of the retaliatory missile capacity that Israel fears. And that's why there's this conjured-up war against Syria. Now, Syria used to play ball with the West, used to do a lot of the extraordinary rendition from the West. It used to do some torture that did to that Canadian citizen. So Syria is not a nice player, but just like Gaddafi has been betrayed by, after he was playing ball with the West, so is Assad, in order to take down this retaliatory capacity. That's why Turkey suddenly turned against Syria recently, and you know, the revelations of Sibel Edmonds talking about all of the classified and secret information that was being given to Turkey and all of the illegal activities of Turkish lobbyists that she uncovered with the FBI, and that was shut down by the FBI, and she was shut down as a whistleblower because Turkey was being prepared, in essence, to be used as a vehicle to get NATO into this war with Assad, and that's why we've had these conjured-up attacks, mortar attacks onto Syria, onto Turkey, so that Turkey could be justified in attacking Syria. Turkey is attempting to get Syria to retaliate against Turkey in a significant way so that NATO can justify coming into Syria with armed intervention as being that Turkey is a member of NATO. But ultimately the target is Iran. The Iran attack has been postponed, according to my sources in Israel, at least 3 months because of the fact that Syria is a tough nut to crack and it's taking longer to destabilize than they had thought. That the Syrian rebels are not doing a good job. They've just recently agreed to a centralized command. They had to have arms twisted to do that. Same problem in Libya, where you brought in a lot of terrorists that the West controls, and they more or less control them. They control them at the very top. They don't control a lot of the actual terrorist personnel, and so there's a lot of infighting that has occurred. We've seen that in Libya, where things got out of control. The Libyan Muslim Brotherhood did not, in fact, as they thought, control the various militia groups. One of those groups attacked the American embassy. There has been a lot of bad blood in the State Department with the fact that security was requested and denied for these. So it may appear in conjunction with this video, which clearly was a provocation, the video that was produced in California under very suspicious circumstances, that was apparently a provocation that was shipped specifically to Libya and shown to these militia groups in order to try to incite the kind of unrest against America that we're seeing there. Now, part of this has to do with what I call the phony Muslim Brotherhood threat agenda. Nothing is more symptomatic of that than Glenn Beck's new documentary called The Project. Now, it isn't that there isn't some Muslim threat against the United States, but to project it as the overall threat against the West, against Christianity, is not true. What's really happening is that the establishment is pushing the Muslim threat as a means of justifying the globalist threat of intervention to other Middle East countries. It's meant to get Americans on board. That's why most of the Christian televangelical organizations are pushing the Muslim threat through video and special documentaries. It's why Glenn Beck came out of it. But what happened in this supposed Swiss document that was uncovered was a major plan in which the Muslim was going to infiltrate the West and take over, sabotage all of its institutions, and destroy the West and create a new Ottoman Empire. This simply cannot happen. The Muslims have never been able to produce a major weapon system on themselves, and terrorism alone has never taken down a nation. You have to have major weapon systems that, frankly, only Russia and China contain right now that are capable of taking down the West. And that's why I'm saying that the Muslim Brotherhood threat is a red herring. Now, it's true that there is some threat there, and most of that threat is, as Ron Paul said, because we continue to provoke it. The United States runs false flag operations in these countries, like that video that was meant to provoke unrest and hatred against American embassy. But the purpose of this is not because, that is, of provoking the Muslims, it's not because they are intended to become the spear of the threat. They are intended to simply justify, in the Americans' mind, the fact that we need to keep intervening. And that's what Mitt Romney has bought into with all of his neocon advisors that surround him. But it is not the threat. The real threat is Russia and China. And how does this play into the Russia and China threat, that is, the takedown of Iran? Iran is part of a systematic program, like Iraq, of targeting Muslim countries so that they create hatred against the West, building a reputation of the United States as the bully of the world. And the purpose is to take some of the major constituencies that used to be supporters of the old Soviet Union, that is, the Slavic people and the Muslim people were the major constituents, and turn them into hatred against the West. That's the reason, for example, in the intervention in the Balkans, why the United States went after civilian infrastructure in Syria, taking down bridges, hospitals, schools, televisions, radio stations, power plants. That's why Israel went into Lebanon the last time, and the first time in their history, instead of directly avoiding civilian targets, they directly targeted civilian infrastructure. Part of this, I believe, is it's hard for Americans to think about this type of philosophy engulfing America, but it really is an Hegelian dialectic that you're creating conflict, you're creating hatred against your own nation. And for what purpose? To justify Russia and China eventually attacking the West. And they have to have a reason, or they don't want to be viewed as the bullies themselves. And so the main rationale for this war eventually is that someone has to stop the bully of the world, which will be NATO and the United States. So I want to emphasize, it's very important, that a lot of people are predicting that Iran will turn into World War III. It will not, in my estimation. Iran is meant to be, the Iran war and the Syria war is meant to cause a major Middle East war, which will rearrange the entire structure of the Middle East and give the United States and Israel complete dominance, as well as building hatred among the Muslims. But it will not turn into World War III. None of the actors in the Middle East have the power of striking the West and the Middle East. And Iran, although it could send a missile as far away as portions of Europe, the United States and Israel intend to not just take out the military structure, or the nuclear structure of Iran. Their real target will be to decimate Iran's military. It won't be simple. It won't be easy. There's going to be a bloody nose to the West. But the United States has put troops in harm's way, still in Iraq, still in Afghanistan, and surrounding in Bahrain and various other Middle Eastern countries, specifically to make sure they do get a bloody nose to justify U.S. intervention. The entire propaganda, in my opinion, about the United States being reluctant to back Israel is just that, propaganda. We've known as far as 2004 that the United States, through its globalist network in the city of London and elsewhere, has been talking about trying to get Israel to attack Iran. Major part of the globalist agenda. It's taken them this long to do it. Part of the thing that slowed them down was the 2008 campaign of Ron Paul. The anti-war sentiment was growing so strong in the United States that they, in fact, fudged and changed the national intelligence estimate about Iran's nuclear program to deny that Iran, or saying that Iran had a nuclear program, but they disbanded it. And they've stayed with that officially, so that they had an excuse to back out of the attack on Iran, which was planned originally in 2008. Now aircraft carriers and other armaments are amassing again. But once again, as I said, my sources indicate the attack has been put off for about 3 months so that Assad could be taken down in Syria. So that's my basic view of what's happening in the Middle East. I still think we're looking at a major world war, but not for about a decade. 8 to 10 years, I say, is what it would take for Russia and China to complete their rearmament. As I covered in the World Affairs Brief recently, the major turning point in Russia as they've decided to forego any more aid under the nuclear or the non-Lugar nuclear anti-proliferation legislation which has provided millions and millions of dollars to Russia to dismantle their older nuclear systems. What the United States doesn't know is that all of those nuclear warheads dismantled from those weapon systems were given back to Russia. We even built Russia a state-of-the-art nuclear refurbishing warhead plant at Mayak. This is all near the underground nuclear complex of Yamato Mountain. And as soon as that plant was complete a few years ago, the Russians declined to allow any of our inspectors into it. We still don't know what's in Yamato Mountain, an underground bunker and factory system as big as the Washington, D.C. metro area underground. But the mere fact that Russia has said we're not going to take any more aid under the non-nuclear legislation means they value higher the ability to say goodbye or to stop all of the inspectors, U.S. inspectors, from seeing anything than they do the aid. And remember, the phony collapse of the Soviet Union, where the Communist Party actually went underground and faked its own demise, was specifically for the purpose to get a huge amount of Western aid to help rebuild the Soviet, ex-Soviet states as well as Russia. That has now happened, and they are cutting off the aid because they are going into major rearmament, and they want to make sure the U.S. inspectors aren't there. Now, once again, we're still a fair several years away from the actual Third World War, in my opinion, because the strategy is for China, in league with Russia, to cover Russia's rear by creating a shield all across the eastern Pacific, and that means taking Japan all the way down through Australia, much as Japan did in World War II. And that's why I don't recommend, for example, Australia and New Zealand as retreat sites. Australia sold most of their mineral rights to China. China will occupy Australia and New Zealand, the Philippines, and much of the wealth of the Indonesian shipping channels. And in order to do that, China has to have a full operational blue water navy. And a lot of people say, well, why is China building aircraft carriers when she's designed all of these weapons to destroy the U.S. aircraft carrier fleet? It's specifically because they tend to use nuclear weapons to decimate our fleet in the Pacific when war comes, and then bring out their aircraft carriers when, in fact, the nuclear weapons have been spent. I also believe there's a long-term strategic analysis that the trigger event of World War III will be North Korea. North Korea has a significant nuclear weapons program. They've tested a couple of nuclear weapons. They have the missiles to develop it, even though they've had several recent failures. But it's interesting to note the contrast between the U.S. treatment of North Korea and the U.S. treatment of Iran. The U.S. and NATO continue to decry North Korea's weapon system, and yet they have guaranteed that there'll be no military intervention, no attempts at regime change. And every time they make threats against North Korea about the nuclear program, they back down. They continue to give food aid and other aid. The sanctions are really paper tigers, whereas Iran, who we don't even know has a nuclear program, I happen to think that they are planning a nuclear program and trying to get one. I would too. I thought the Globalists were out to get me. But nevertheless, the contrast between how you're going to attack Iran, even though it doesn't have a full-blown nuclear program yet, and you give North Korea a free ride, means that the globalists in the West are aware that North Korea is being preserved as China's trigger. And why does it make a good trigger? Because North Korean forces are so overwhelming in the North Korean peninsula that the only way to stop a massive wave of North Korean attack into the south is to use tactical nuclear weapons. The United States is keeping some 13,000 to 30,000 troops in South Korea, specifically to be held hostage for this event. And I think the U.S. knows that North Korea is a puppet of China and will begin the trigger of that war. But you see, if the U.S. responds with tactical nuclear weapons to stop the North Korean attack, that gives the opening for both Russia and China to do their long-awaited nuclear preemptive strike on the West. I believe it will be attack on military targets only in the United States, sparing most of the cities, and possibly take out the nuclear targets in the UK. I think initially they will not strike Europe because they want to blackmail Europe into submission. The globalists will come out of their bunkers and say, Russians and Chinese deceived us. We now need to join, since our military has been destroyed, in a militarized New World Order to prosecute this grand patriotic war. And many Americans will be deceived at our leaders' claims that they were deceived at this or that they didn't know what was coming. Like 9/11, the United States knows fully what they're coming there, in fact, covering for the military preparations of Russia and China and making sure that the United States is vulnerable to this nuclear attack so that there will be the maximum incentive to get Americans to finally give up national sovereignty.
Unbelievable. Joel Skousen, researcher, editor of World Affairs Brief, is our guest. Joel, I've got to stop you because every time you're on, and of course the film we've made that's coming out in a few weeks that we are putting up for pre-order today at InfoWarsStore.com, you go over all this with all the facts, all the documents, then we put video clips over it, all the maps. And when you look at the whole globalist New World Order Anglo-American agenda, and for new listeners, that doesn't mean white people. It's just the United States, England is called the Anglo-American system by the globalists themselves. When you look at it, your breakdown is what makes sense. Everything they're doing is about not making us self-sufficient individually. Everything they're doing is about hurting people, especially the minorities in the compact cities. Everything they're doing is about demonizing us. I would notice a decade ago, News Corps would be pro-war, pro-tyranny domestically, but then badmouth America and their publications overseas, run by Rupert Murdoch. And this whole program, just like World War I, World War II, setting up these enemies that are real enemies, but they still set them up to begin with. It's not that Hitler was run by, quote, the West. It was that he was empowered. And because I've read all the even mainline history books admit that. It's just not something that's on History Channel. They admit they put Mao Zedong into power in '49. I remember the John Birchers were talking about that and stuff I read from the 60s and 70s. That was declassified, what, about a decade ago, and is now on History Channel. They had the old CIA section chief, who was very elderly at the time, bragging that they'd actually put him in power because he was, quote, a stabilizing force. David Rockefeller wrote an editorial when Mao died. And the New York Times actually saying that, but not pointing out that they'd put him in. So it's so diabolical that the eugenicists that run this, they'll get to wipe out all the urban dwellers, and I don't just mean black people. They'll get to, wipe out all the yuppies, all the people they disdain, all the trendies. And then you'll have just some of the people in the countryside that they know will then fully mobilize behind this takeover. As you said, the secret weapons will be rolled out. I've talked to Bob Bowman and others that worked in Star Wars. There's no doubt that they're 20, 30 years ahead of what we even know. The public space program is an admitted front. They even admit 90% of the missions were secret. And so that's where this is all going. X-ray lasers, Shabo meteor guns, decapitation weapons that could kill all the world leaders in a matter of hours, that can even blow up bunkers, a mile and a half under a mountain. All of this, super penetrators. I myself have reverse engineered this information, and just everything you're saying is the only thing that makes sense. And then in their popular culture, you almost see a preparation for this. And now we see the elite scurrying, and even their mid-level people, to create hardened structures. So I want to talk about the time frame of this, but what about the incredible arrogance of openly using Al-Qaeda? Openly saying, because you talked about how they use, the Muslim extremist manufactured Muslim Brotherhood that goes back to British intelligence, in Lawrence of Arabia and his handlers 100 years ago or close to that. Fast forwarding now to what we see happening domestically, it's also used to set up the paramilitary checkpoints, to train us that we're all prisoners and all under suspicion, to bring in the cashless society. So it's also about that domestic agenda. And I see a key chink in the armor saying, wait, you want to fondle us when we fly and abuse our families and abuse people that, have medical prosthesis and things. You want to break our will. For Al-Qaeda, you claim, is hiding in our luggage or in our pants, but then you run Al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria. I mean, that's now admitted even in the New York Times. It's just amazing that they could have such a open paradox or oxymoron of give up your rights because of al-Qaeda, but then the West runs al-Qaeda against the Russians, runs them against the Serbs, runs them now against the Syrians, the Libyans, everybody else. And it's just amazing that all this is going on. And is there a plan to then double-cross Saudi Arabia that has been kind of the bulwark of British intelligence and the whole Anglo-American system? Joel Skousen.
Well, I don't think there's a plan to double-cross Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has been such an excellent puppet for the West in being able to fund al-Qaeda. Most of the, we have to remember how this operates. They really run al-Qaeda at the top, and they don't control the individual terrorists that are used. The terrorists, get orders from the top, and they don't know, who's running the show at the top. So that's why there is sometimes some lack of control that happens whenever you basically talk to the top leaders and then you get them to give orders down there. But there's a lot of mistakes that happened, and that's fortunately for us that they don't have absolute control, but they have effective control. But I think it's important to emphasize the point that the Muslim Brotherhood is the big red herring that we're dealing with. It's meant to drive Americans into accepting all of this diminution of their civil rights, but it's also made to divert Americans from seeing the real threat, the Russian and Chinese threat. And it's amazing to me, Alex, how even conservatives, even people who listen to your show, call me for consultation and things, they, continue to think, I think that's because they listen to Glenn Beck so much and others that are pushing the Muslim Brotherhood threat. They continue to think that that's the big threat that they need to prepare for. And it really isn't true. Unlike the Germans who could infiltrate, speak English like Americans and infiltrate America and Britain, the Muslims can't do that. They look different. They have different characteristics. You can't have them infiltrate the same thing that you
But
can.
even the Germans, who were a lot better at it than the Middle Eastern Muslims and people, they got caught most of the time as well.
That's right. And the only reason that we have this Muslim infiltration is because the United States is letting it, Europe is letting it. They purposely opened the floodgates.
Oh, listen, they will never, this is on record, they will not let Europeans and people into Canada. They will not let Europeans hardly into America. But I've been there at Canada while they're screaming at me when I'm going in there as a journalist or even as a tourist and just watching foreigners from the East just walk right up, boom, where they're from. They just, and the Canadian border people literally bow down. I mean, they're just straight through.
Yes, it's very disturbing, and the United States continues to bring in other Muslims. They continue to incite. I mean, we had an incident this week about the New York Federal Reserve bombing plot. It's another of the agent provocateur. Take away the, it's not just informants. They employed, they gave a little disinformation out to the New York Times in a story saying that this guy had invited in other people to join him in the plot and eventually invited in an FBI informer. That isn't true at all. The FBI informer was there from the very beginning. It turns out to be an agent provocateur, provoking, inciting, telling him, shoveling in the plans, the explosives, everything. You take away the FBI in these arrests, and there is no case.
Well, that's even admitted in mainstream media, that there's hundreds of cases of them finding mental midgets, provocateurs, idiots, drug addicts, all of this. Let me expand on this, though. We've even seen our military, even some high-level generals who continue to not hit Iran when they're basically pushed into it, who continue to say, hey, Russia, China, hey, we need to, stop obsessing in the Middle East, Central Asia. We need to get out. And we are actually seeing a lot of leaks of people within the system who are basically agreeing with what you're saying, Joel Skousen. It's just tribally so much fun at a primitive level to get upset about the Muslims all day. But I don't know how mainline conservatives and people don't get it and don't understand that the globalists run the Muslim extremists on record, and they just don't get it. I tell them, look at the Homeland Security training manuals that keep coming out. Returning veterans, gun owners, libertarians, constitutionalists, real Christians, people they know that aren't going to go along with this total takeover. We are the ones being listed as terrorists. We are the thing. I mean, it's a total cover story, the Muslims. And you're right. We've got to break this. I mean, is there any way to break this and stop them from 6, 7, 8, 9 years from now? That'll come quick. And I agree more and more with your timeline, because you can really see the battle lines being drawn and the real military preparations against China and Russia. I mean, is there any way to stop them nuking us and doing this and wiping out all the useful idiots in the major cities?
Well, I get this all the time from people. Why don't we see, or why don't I see just a neutron bomb or a EMP strike, which would simply wipe out our infrastructure here, and why do they have to nuke us? Can't we stop this nuke? And I say no. The reason is, for example, an EMP strike takes out the civilian infrastructure through shutting down the electricity, but it still can be put up within about anywhere from 6 weeks to about 6 months, depending on the damage. It can be knit back together. And I said, besides, the military is increasingly hardened, almost 90% hardened against EMP, and they have to take out the military in order to, forego or put forth their plans for actual dominance over the West. And so there will be a nuclear strike someday. I mean, these people aren't building these nuclear weapons, for fun. They intend to use them someday. Every single military exercise, international large-scale exercise with Russia and China, involves a simulated nuclear strike on America. It's going to come someday. And that's why, while we fight for our freedom, we still ought to be preparing for a takedown in case we can't stop this. The only way, I get this all the time. Well, why can't we know who these globalists are. Why can't we just, get somebody like Ron Paul into office and arrest these people? And I say, well, the problem is they have captured all of the surveillance requirements. It's one thing to know that David Rockefeller believes in globalism and suspect that he's behind this, or George Soros, or many of these other people, but you can't actually prosecute them and take them down for illegal acts, for treason against the United States, unless you wiretap their phones and record that. And who controls all that? The dark side of government. And that's why it'd be almost impossible, even for someone like Ron Paul, who was in office, because they simply wouldn't tell him the truth. Those people...
Well, sure, they're masters at creating these big committees, and then they come in and agree on something and label an illegal war, secret arrest, torture as something else, and then they all have plausible deniability. You can see how it's done. One area is they've gotten so arrogant, though. I've heard them on Bloomberg Financial on XM brag that they've conquered America, they've conquered Europe, nobody's going to stop them. They bragged and said Goldman Sachs has conquered Europe. They've said John Corzine can steal over $1 million and lie to Congress. So they've gotten so arrogant that they're really committing crimes openly now. And when Media Matters 2 years ago, it got leaked, their own memo, and Politico thought it was just great. Oh, hey, they're infiltrating alternative media and, quote, sabotaging it. Well, those are criminal acts. And so, forcibly inoculating kids nationwide in different schools. All the things they're doing. I mean, it would take like a real committee on un-American activities to haul these people in and just publicly expose them, and then just have state grand juries, once we had the political will, to expose them. And that's why the John Warner Defense Authorization Act and everything is set up around stopping states and legislatures and governors. They know one of the only hopes is states getting back, grand juries then indicting people, state police arresting them when they're there. The feds are standing by to swoop in at that point. Remember last year in Texas, the legislature in the House unanimously voted to say no more groping, TSA, we're going to enforce the law. And Homeland Security and the Pentagon announced F-16s are on standby for blockading Texas. And they were ready. Let's go civil war. And it was just hanging out there as you're not going to do jack squat. I talked to high-level military people and later confirmed it with low-level. When Rick Perry on the campaign trail jokingly said Texas ought to secede, they got federalized National Guard and surrounding states fired up, and National Guard in the state fired up, literally warming the tanks up to go seize the state capitol and arrest Rick Perry, even though it was a joke. And he got a phone call and came out and said, I was just joking. And they're like, you bet you were just joking, boy.
Well, I think you talk about trying to control the alternate media. I really have to worry about some of the things that I've heard claimed, from insiders. Much as I respect some of the things that, they come out with, Doug Hagman, I think, has got a problem with this TSA source on a couple of issues. I know that they've been talking about this October surprise. They've been talking about the potential of military people are going to come in and save us and do a coup on Obama. I have an alternative point of view here. I really, I've been in government. I've been in the military. I know that there are never allowed to be any officers other than yes men ever rise to high military position in the United States military. They call them out. I mean, they got my number by the time I was captain. They knew that this guy isn't going to go any higher. He's not, a globalist. He's not a New World Order people. But, if there really was a coup that was going to be pulled in order to save us from Obama and the other things, the worst thing a true source would do, he wouldn't get on and spread it all over the Internet that there was going to be a coup. That would be the death of the coup. It just can't happen that way. First of all, I think it's just absolutely disinformation.
Oh, I want to be clear. When I say sources, I'm talking about like colonel level. I mean, it was in the news. They said they were going to block, have an air blockade of Texas and not let aircraft in. But that was just hung out there. And we've got and of course, they tell people in the FBI and places, hey, something big's coming in late October, early November. Even if there's a 10% chance of something. So no, I don't want a military coup, and I don't think one would happen. And I agree. If sources were really talking about that, they would quietly die in a canoe accident the next day.
That's right. One of the things that people have to realize, Steve Quayle has his sources, so does Doug Hagman, and continually feed him. Lindsey Williams claims that he has his sources. I happen to think on Lindsey that his original, Richfield oil guy was legit, and he got some really good information. I happen to feel like he's being led along a little bit by these follow-on sources. But let me give my reasoning here. The government surveils every telephone conversation. They don't know exactly what we're talking about right now. They especially make sure that every news media, every right-wing talk show host, their telephones are always tapped. There is no way that anyone's going to be able to talk to any of our people on our side of the political spectrum and leak information about government plans, whether it's an October surprise, without getting shut down. If they are permitted month after month, year after year to talk to these people, is because they're permitted. And that's what we've got to be careful of, is that these, I'm very, very careful when someone calls me up on the phone and says I claim to be an insider source or I'm working inside. Because
sure, I mean, sometimes I get calls from high-level Council on Foreign Relations people, off record. I mean, these are real people. I'm not getting anonymous stuff. I mean, I get some pretty crazy confirmed, people, but you can usually tell. And sometimes they'll just outright threaten you, like they're acting like you're your friend. They're like, I think your family's going to be all right as long as you don't go too far. I mean, at the level I'm at, I really do get these calls.
Well, my point is this. I think that there's a concerted effort to discredit our movement, Alex. By the hype of 2012, how many times, has Gerald Celente and Lindsey Williams said the dollar's going to collapse in 2012, the euro's going to collapse in 2012, we're going to have imminent financial collapse, the dollar's going to lose its reserve currency status. I'm here to say that they really haven't thought that out very well. Who's ever feeding that line to them is trying to get egg on the face of our entire movement, so that we're the laughing stock. It's Y2K all over again, in the sense now that was a legitimate threat. We owe a great deal of gratitude to Gary North in getting the government moving, so they did fix most of the problems, of what they didn't fix they covered up when Y2K came around. But there's so many people. And I consulted in this with people saying, I said, don't cut your finance, don't go off into the boonies without any financial things, because, this thing is going to get fixed.
Oh, listen, this is what happened with me with Y2K. I thought, sure, there's computer system problems, but it's hyped. And until a month or two before, was saying it was hype. And my listeners got so mad, they said, no, you're wrong. And then I did like 10 hours of broadcast that day, reported on ABC News. My wife comes in and says, they just said a missile was fired from Russia, and that was on the news at the time. And I come back and go, well, they said a missile was fired. I don't know what that means. And then I was on Michael Trudeau's show joking around about it hours later when it didn't happen. going, missile fired, like making a joke after we knew it was that Scud out of Serbia, but that was the media trying to hide. And then they went and edited it all together. The media did, to like 5 minutes of me sounding completely like a crazy person to take it out of context. That happened last week. I read tweets where they were saying we're going to kill Mitt Romney. And people went and edited all that together, me talking, and said, Alex is saying this. I mean, these are incredibly dirty tricks. Look, I don't blame people like, Lindsey Williams or whatever, or Gerald Celente for thinking things are collapsing. We're in a slow, continued collapse. And, it's in the New York Times and Joseph Stiglitz saying Europe's in a depression. But I get what you're saying. With the currencies, they seesaw them. There's a currency war where everybody's debasing it. And so the dollar will fall faster for a while, then others will fall faster. That'll make the dollar look like it's going up. But generally, they want a slow collapse into austerity. They don't want a big one. So you're saying you think, and believe me, I hope that's the case, buying more time. But, Europe's already in a pretty big pickle, and we're already seeing a lot of stuff here. You're saying you don't think by next April, like Max Kaiser says, that it's going to really be bad?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that it's not bad. It is bad. I'm saying that they have the power to cover it up longer and extend it out. Let me just give my reasoning here because it's very, very important. Let's talk about the threat of hyperinflation, for example. And by the way, let me just say, like Y2K, the number one reason that everybody gives me when they call about relocation or secure home consultation is I'm afraid of imminent collapse, and I got to get out within the next month. And I keep telling people, you have more time to do this stuff properly. Because if you try to do things like the end of the world is coming in a month, you're going to get caught like Y2K out there in the boonies with no income stream.
And everyone's going to laugh at you. Listen, I have been saying 2012 is a hoax for 5 years. Well, you watch. When the world doesn't end December 21st, I'm going to get blamed, and they're going to say Alex Jones said the world was going to end. You watch.
Yeah. And it isn't you. It's your guests sometimes that say that type of thing. And I know you're very reluctant to counter a guest that's here, but I just wanted to give this contrasting opinion of why there won't be either the loss of the dollar reserve
sure, go ahead.
Recently or hyperinflation. The people, even Peter Schiff, has said there's going to be hyperinflation. But, you don't think things out very well unless you understand what does it really take to get hyperinflation. First of all, you've got to have a fairly modest monetary base that you can double and triple in size fairly rapidly. That isn't true with the dollar. We have a monetary base of $200 to $300 trillion. The Fed could print $20 to $30 trillion a month, or a year, and it wouldn't be more than 2 to 3 months of percent of the money supply. That's why I say they have much more room to inflate. And the only reason they're being judicious at all is because they know that if you start getting over 10%, people start really noticing, and that's why real inflation is right now between 7 and 9%, and not the 1.6 to 3% that the government is saying. And we also have to look at the second thing in hyperinflation. You've got to have an automatic mechanism where the government can keep injecting money into people's pockets so that they can keep pace with inflation. That's the only way you get your Weimar Germany type inflation. The government took over the payment of wages for people, and they kept increasing people's wages to keep pace with the increasing printing of money. That's the only reason you get to carting wheelbarrows full of dollars or marks around. But you see, we don't have that structure. And so if you've got inflation over 15% going to 20%, it still wouldn't be hyperinflation. But it would be enough that people would start to stagnate. They couldn't afford to buy anything. The economy would move into a reverse, even though certain people who are on the receiving end, at government contractors, et cetera, of large doses of money, they could raise their prices. Most people couldn't. You have stagflation. So you can't have hyperinflation unless you have those two things. Small monetary base where you continue to double and triple the supplies of the money, which would be very difficult to do even for the Federal Reserve. They don't need to do that. They've got room to bail out Europe, and that's what they've been doing. People predicted that this Greek, would cause the collapse of the euro, and then it was Spain, and then it was Italy. All three of those are in bankruptcy nearly, and they haven't caused the collapse of the euro because the U.S. continues to come in with dollars under the table and fund those banks and keep those banks from defaulting.
Well, Joel, I agree with you, and they're more sophisticated now with their computers and their flash trading and the rest of it. I agree to you to this extent, but the issue is they're human too. They could make a mistake, and we could see some type of serious gyration out of control where it flies off the table. If you look at this like a gyro that they're trying to manage. But I've noticed if you look at the real inflation, it's in Rolex watches, it's in super expensive secure type homes. It's in farmland. It's in some of the commodities, but not as much. The globalists are keeping most of the money actually just papering over the derivatives. They're not even taking it personally. Some of it they are, and that's why they're kind of cheating. It's like in Goodfellas, where they rob the airport and get $10 million and say, don't spend any of this. The cops are watching us, and some of them start to spend it, so the cops figure it out. We are seeing, and the news is reporting that luxury items are the only area really ballooning, and we are almost seeing the beginnings of some hyperinflation because they're trying to not have a bunch of that money actually hit the streets. That's why when they gave the banks trillions of dollars, you notice they wouldn't lend it. And people said, why aren't you doing that? Well, if they did lend it, it would actually start the inflation faster. Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, Alex. This is what I've been saying in my World Affairs Brief for months now, is that there's two actual economies. There's the real economy, then there's the speculative economy. Almost all of this bailout money has gone to the big banks, the big investment houses, and they're churning the money in the speculative market. They're not spending it or investing it into the real economy, except to the extent of about 20%. And that's precisely why, you're exactly right, why a lot of inflation isn't showing up. It's ballooning the speculative economy, and a lot of it's going overseas. A lot of it's in the forex, the foreign exchange markets. A lot of it's in derivatives and in the hedge funds, and that's why it isn't coming home. Now, let me get to the other point about the dollar, collapsing. The only way that the dollar could collapse, is if we had hyperinflation, which becomes worthless, which I've shown is very, very difficult.
Or if countries all start dumping it.
Or if countries all start dumping it. Remember, though, this sounds easy to say that they can start dumping it, but remember, you can't just dump it. Dumping means trading it in for another currency. There isn't any other currency on the world as big as the dollar that could even absorb that dumping without causing hyperinflation in the other currencies. For example, the euro is about 1/10 the size of the dollar, and so is the pound. For them to replace the dollar, you'd have to inflate their currencies by 10 times, and you can't do that without hyperinflation. You can't have special drawing rights replace the dollar as well, because that would require that the various basket of currencies that you create all agree not to inflate past a certain rate. Like the euro has to agree that all the countries who print euros can't exceed more than 3.5%. Could you trust China, to be transparent? I don't think so. You can't trust the euro. You can't trust the British. Everybody actually trusts the Fed in the sense that they are the only ones strong enough to bail us out, and that's why there's virtually no incentive to kill the dollars. Another reason is because there's so many dollars spread around the world. Remember that everybody's traded value for those dollars that they hold, and they're going to want value back when they trade it into something else. And I'm saying there's not another currency or capable of forming another currency that's capable of replacing the dollar, because they're all fiat currencies. And just like you said, they all like dollar inflation because the euro can inflate up to the rate that the dollar's inflating, and they keep on par in the currency markets. It looks like they're equal. And so when the U.S. inflates 10%, all the other currencies are free to do that without making their currencies look bad in the market. So there's a lot of incentive, and we cannot underestimate this, to preserve the dollar as the reserve currency. Now, Russia and China have stopped using the dollar. Iran stopped using the dollar, but these are still minor uses of the dollar as the reserve currency. You've got to remember there's two major things. That's the petrodollar, of which 80% of that is tied up in U.S. oil production or oil purchases. And then there's the dollar that's necessary to buy things in the United States, which is still a major exporter and a major engine of the economy of the world. And so if you want to deal with the U.S. in terms of selling them oil, and you want to deal with the U.S. in terms of their economy, you have to deal in dollars. And that's why, since it's the largest share of the dollar reserve system, that there isn't as much danger of the dollar ever collapsing, except over the long haul. And that's why I'm saying I think you're on the right track by saying they're going to continue to keep this thing going for a few years. And the reason, Alex, is I think they want the cover of the World War to finally justify the collapse. They don't want to get the blame, and they would get the blame if it happened right now.
Well, I just want to be clear, though, about all of our guests. It's okay, because it's important if someone disagrees with what they've heard guests saying, then it's important to have in a debate of ideas that happening, and I think it's good that you do it respectfully. I hope others do it respectfully. At the same time, I think these men genuinely believe what they're saying, and I think from the perspective of somebody like Gerald Celente, who I really like and is just a wonderful guy and a frequent guest here and a friend of mine, his view is we're in a collapse when we're deindustrialized and things are rotting and falling apart, and he sees it getting worse, and the media just spins it and says, there's nothing wrong. Everything's sunshine. We haven't been in a recession for 4 years. Here's some new fake job numbers. I think when you talk about total collapse and his total collapse is two different deals. I think you mean kind of a road warrior, apocalyptic deal, versus when he says collapse, just things getting worse and worse and worse. And I think it's really a mix of the two. But I agree with you that when I've heard, Max Kaiser put the date of April on it, that by April you're going to see the death of the dollar. That's not what I've watched them do the last 5-6 years. They drive the dollar down, and then they drive the other stuff down, and it just kind of seesaws back and forth. But overall, all the currencies are sinking, and it's done in a way where people don't notice, and then the inflation that is there shows up in the commodities, in the stock markets, like you were saying. And so yuppies go, oh, look, the stock market's been flat in 10 years, but at least it's flat. No, it's not, because it takes more of those dollars and other currencies to buy those stocks. The truth is, there is inflation inherent out there. It's just more of a rotting, slower inflation.
That's correct. But I think we have to be very, very careful about the use of the word collapse, because I think when you say, the euro's going to collapse, they're printing more Deutschmark, which by the way, was disinformation, spread from some pretty high levels, Alex, about Germany reprinting the Deutschmark. Just wasn't true. They're very much committed to keeping the euro alive. These are globalists. They're not going to let the EU collapse.
No, they're going to bankrupt the whole world and use NATO and Europe as the core of the world government. They've said that.
Exactly. NATO is going to be the forerunner of the militarized New World Order that I'm predicting that they'll form. It'll be probably called the League of Democracy, that's already been floated by John McCain and others. It'll exclude, finally, the communist countries, which they should have excluded at the beginning of the UN if they didn't intend to create conflict as they do. But the NATO is prototyped as the militarized version of the New World Order. And it's very, very dangerous to be allowing these foreign wars at NATO to be charging in. And increasingly, the U.S. is using NATO because, the U.S. doesn't get as people don't get as upset. But I think it's very important to realize that they're going to continue to draw out these slowdown in the economy, the currency, and other things. They have a great deal to prop things up, a lot more than the power than people think. And, people like Peter Schiff, as much as I respect him, he needs to understand more what these globalists are all about, what this dark side of government is all about.
I know. I mean, I like Peter, but I've had him on, and he still kind of acts like there's no New World Order or global government, when literally the last 3 years, they went from saying there is no plan for world government to we're mega banks, we're authoritarian, we're going to set up a world government. But everybody's so used to them always denying it that you're not supposed to say it. I mean, I can show you Time Magazine, Newsweek, Financial Times of London, Economist Magazine, Davos meetings, Herman von Rompuy, Barroso, Gordon Brown. I can go through hundreds of clips right now. We've done this. In fact, I want to do some new videos with all the saying, oh, yes, the collapse will bring in the world government. Europe will be the core. NATO will be the core of the new army. We're going to, by 2020, ban all single home dwelling new construction. I mean, this is when they're talking to themselves. They are talking to 2020, 2022, 2025 as when they're going to have the new dark age that they're going to impose. And again, briefly here, go over the 3 different power blocks you see, or 4 different power blocks, and where that's going. And then I want to shift gears. And, of course, they could always double-cross and just nuke us tomorrow. I mean, I don't think any of us know what they might do because they've got different programs and plans running. But I agree with you. The real plan I see is closest 7 to 8 years out from nuking us. On the outside, 15. Correct me if you think I'm wrong. Joel Skousen, the World Affairs Brief, is with us. And then we're going to take a pause here for the 2012 money bomb. Even if you're watching this later at prisonplanet.tv, even if you're watching this later on YouTube, we're trying to get satellite uplinks up to get this message out to the world, not just here in the U.S., where we've really, from grassroots level, from underdog level, really challenged the globalists. And just pray for us, folks, because believe me, they're not happy about what we're doing, but they don't want to kill me and make me a martyr because then they know that puts a highlighting on what I've said and done. They'd rather just assassinate my character. So please pray for us. I mean, pray for our provision, our protection. And I don't just say that to, pray for us like we have a connection. I need those prayers. I need that intercession. I'm only here because of your prayers. My grandmother, almost 90 years old, across town, with breast cancer, is over there praying for me right now. I know she is. I can feel it. And I'm telling you, folks, I need those prayers. Joel Skousen needs those prayers, and my crew needs them. And those of us fighting evil need them. And I pray for you. Pray for us, but also donate at InfoWarsMoneyBomb.com. Buy books, buy videos, buy ProPure water filters. Spread the word. Tell people. About what are we doing? We go to rebroadcast in about 3 hours when this officially ends, folks. We've extended a few hours. In fact, I should have asked the crew. I should have planned that out. I guess we just restart from somewhere until the Sunday show comes back at 4 p.m. tomorrow, the radio show. What is the plan on that? I should probably, I've been off and on for 48 hours now. It'll be 48 hours in about 23 minutes. But again, we'll probably start retransmitting it probably, or some of the larger blocks at the Money Bomb streams, or what are we going to put on the audio streams when this goes to rebroadcast? Have we thought about that? There's so much planning that goes into all this, and okay, well, I'm going to make a decision then, but I need to talk to the IT guys during the next break to decide what's the easiest thing to do, because we're going to probably, obviously, just keep restreaming, right, out to everybody that's watching. So up at YouTube, the Alex Jones channel, which they're trying to shut down right now, by the way. They're constantly behind the scenes with, it's got almost 250 million views, total about 500+ million views on all our YouTube channels in the last 3 years. That scares the system that I can make a film like The Obama Deception seen more than 40 million times in the different versions that are out there. 20 million here, 12 million there, 5 million here, 2 million there, 40+ million total views that we can see and know about. We had over 20 million on the Google video version until they locked us out of it and shut that down. I mean, look, they don't like the fact that I can get up here and get off the script, okay? And I don't have all the answers. I have guests on that I respect, so we can all have a larger debate here, so you can figure out what you think's going on and ask God to, give you discernment. But again, Joel, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you think it's important for people to help us get satellite uplinks to free to air, which doesn't really bring money back to us, but it gets the word out to these satellites to be able to put a couple hours?
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. It's extremely important to take advantage of these almost what we call loss leaders out there. There's a lot of free broadcast available if you're willing to pay the bills. And sometimes, you can't make money on truth. Truth is so controversial. Truth is so sharp that you've got to simply support it as a cause. And that's why I endorse what you're trying to do. It's going to be very important, Alex.
Well, thank you. And people need to understand, I know there's a lot of poor folks and hardworking people, and they're saying, I'm going to get my paycheck today and pay, you give you $100. I'm like, do not do it. Unless, obviously, it means something to you, whatever. I understand that. But I don't want people going without. I want you to get ready and get prepared. If you don't have a lot of money, folks, spread the word to get people to find the truth, and then some will donate as well. But for all the people I know, and there's a lot of them, Liberty produced a lot of wealth. And you've got money out there, folks. I'm taking my profits this year and basically not even taking a paycheck to put it all into this, because I realize there's no future if we don't really face these people down. So for those of you out there that are well-to-do or upper middle class, you are insane in my view, if you don't spread the word about this show and donate, because for whatever reason, and I don't brag, I'm a humble person. I come across as, arrogant and kind of a maniac sometimes, really just because I come from wild, revolutionary stock all the way back to the start of this country. It's incredible. We've done our genealogies on both sides of the family. It's just rebels and fighters of tyranny. I feel humble knowing who my ancestors are, constantly, always at the heart of revolutions. On both sides of my family, not bragging, heart of the revolution, literally starting the Texas Revolution. Literally starting the 1776. I mean, if I went through it all, it sounds arrogant. I'm not going to tell you who all my ancestors are. Going direct lines in my families on the male and female side, constantly interwoven, even though these families didn't even know that. There's providence in all of this. And there are people out there that come from bloodlines of resistance against tyranny, and you need to be fighting evil as well. Joel, I'm kind of off there and left field in a way, but just that I just in my gut know I have a responsibility to fight evil, and then I know I'm a weak person. I feel bad that I'm not doing more, and then I look at other people who I know come from the old thing of uphold your family name, stand up, try to live up to your ancestors, quality. And I, as a child, I never understood that. As I get older, I realize more and more instinctively and at a spiritual level, that's what this is all about. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, it's absolutely true. I mean, there's a real spiritual level. I have a family background. My uncle was W. Cleon Skousen, the great patriot and constitutional scholar. And, it influenced me. I can't deny the fact that I was greatly influenced by his book, The Naked Communist, where he outlined, how the State Department was allowing communists to come in and infiltrate the government and overthrow countries like China and give them to the communists. It really was, our heritage cannot be denied, and we have to work to fight for liberty, and it's a spiritual battle. As Dr. Monteith said, the Brotherhood of Darkness is building the best enemies that money can buy, and we do need people's prayers to help us through this.
Absolutely, and we need people, all of you out there probably have amazing people in your background, your mom, your dad, your great-grandfather. Our ancestors stood up against evil. They weren't perfect, but the reason the globalists like to tear down the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, what our founders did was, it was inspired of God. I've studied it. It was a very special time. And God has a plan for this country. That's why the devil has come here and taken over America to use it as an engine of global domination, because the fight for the future of humanity is here in the United States. There is no doubt that it was foreordained from the foundations of the world that the United States had an incredibly important destiny. We're going to play a short clip here to reconnect with you, Joel, and then do about 20 minutes with you. I know you've got to go here soon, but I want to get into the election, any type of false flag stuff you could be worried about, in any other areas we haven't covered with Joel Skousen of worldaffairsbrief.com. If we don't get it up there today, because the cover and the write-up, it's coming in a little bit earlier than I thought. If you want to start pre-ordering Strategic Relocation, it's going to be up today, if not tomorrow, at InfoWarsStore.com. Invaluable. I'm really proud of this film/presentation with Joel Skousen that we did when he was here about 5 months ago. We've just been working on it tirelessly since then. We got about 20 minutes left with Joel Skousen. And we are going to get Strategic Relocation up in the shopping cart very, very soon. The new film, you can pre-order that. It'll be shipping out in about 3 weeks. We're going to put a date on that. This kind of snuck up on me because I'm like, as soon as it's manufactured from 2 different manufacturers and in trucks, and then we do a little pre-order for folks, as soon as we know it's coming, we can put it up. And I actually would have had it up for pre-sale about a week ago, but I've been so busy. So pre-sale starts now. As soon as it gets up there, InfoWarsStore.com. Get his book, Strategic Relocation, North American Guide to Safe Places. And we can show people a document cam shot of that. And also the Secure Home, 3rd edition, Joel M. Skousen. Excellent to have this. Everybody should have this. So all 3 of these items, InfoWarsStore.com. When you're there, also get the magazines subscription at cost, or get them in bulk at cost to give them to friends and family in your area. Okay, Joel, I want to cover some other areas. What do you make of Mitt Romney? Because I know you didn't endorse him 4 years ago, and clearly the fact that, Candy Crowley and others are trying to skew the debate, where that's going, what you think is going to happen in the election, and what you think will happen if Mitt Romney actually got in versus if Obama gets in. Joel Skousen of World Affairs Brief.
Alex, this is a really timely topic. I'm glad I've got the opportunity to comment on it. The big problem that I see
in internet coverage of Mitt Romney is that too many of them are charging that this is another controlled candidate like Obama. He's a puppet of the New World Order and the establishment. They try to bring all kinds of superficial connections together to prove their point. Let me state clearly, first of all, before I start, that I am not in favor of Mitt Romney. I have not endorsed him. I will not endorse him. I heard Ron Paul here in Utah yesterday saying he's not going to endorse Mitt Romney. And there's a reason for that. Even though I do not believe he is a controlled insider. In fact, I can prove he's not an insider. Nevertheless, he is an over-ambitious person with conservative roots who is going to do as much damage to us as if he were a controlled insider. But it isn't different from our analysis point of view, from our education as conservatives, to understand that this is a case of a person like Ronald Reagan, who was a compromiser but was a basic good conservative, who got into office without their permission, and they had to control him afterwards or during the process, and that's exactly what's happened. Let me give some examples. As people might know from Ronald Reagan, he did make some severe compromises, even in gun control or against the Second Amendment people in California. And they fought him tooth and nail towards getting the Republican nomination versus Rockefeller. He won, and they didn't intend him to win. A lot of people now know, because of my uncle's publication, that Reagan got into a meeting within an hour after his nomination with the three heads of the major networks, and they essentially threatened him that, we can make or break you in this campaign, depending on how we give you coverage. And then kind of a subtle incentive, we would look with favor upon your candidacy only if you would accept George H.W. Bush as your vice president, allow him to control your transition team and the personnel who will staff the White House. He accepted that deadly compromise, thinking that he could get around him. He was only the vice president if Bush would be it. But in fact, and Reagan did buck his staff and his national security advisor handlers, and that's why they threw an assassination attempt at him, to make him a believer that we really mean business. There's a danger in having a non-insider in the White House. That's why the establishment went out of their way to stop Mitt Romney in 2008 and to stop him in 2012. Anybody thinks that they would have thrown four candidates up against him, Perry, Kaine, Gingrich, a real globalist, and Senator from Pennsylvania. In any case, they threw phony surges, push polling, to try to push as four globalists up against it to deny his candidacy. They do not like people with their own money getting into the political process, avoiding the vetting that the media does, telling the American people who are the acceptable candidates in the Republican and Democratic Party. Both Ron Paul evaded that, and Mitt Romney evaded that. Mitt threw money, and Ron Paul through building a major network of freedom-loving conservative libertarians. And the establishment equally tried to stop them. They did Ron Paul worse than Romney, but even after Ron Paul was out of the thing, they had to stop Romney. They couldn't stop him. He did get the nomination. And so now they're in the controlling mode. That is, trying to control him by surrounding him with establishment advisors. He chose the Darth Vader of the lobbying movement, Michael Chertoff and associates, to handle his transition and to handle his staffing. He brought in all kinds of neocon advisors, the worst of the PNAC groups, Project for the New American Century. And that's why Mitt Romney has the worst foreign policy record, or platform even worse than Obama, in terms of projecting the globalist New World Order continued intervention in the Middle East. But it's important to recognize that there's a difference between a controlled person like Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is a conservative Mormon, and Mormons have a particular political problem, and that is that because of their persecution background, they often feel like they want the world to accept them as the mild-mannered, easygoing Christians that they are, and overcome this persecution process ever since the days of polygamy, which they gave up in the late 19th century. They've been trying to get back into the mainstream. And this is a problem, especially for Mormon constitutional conservatives, because the Mormon doctrine and religion has a great deal of doctrine and topics about the fact that the Constitution is inspired, and even better, in their Book of Mormon scripture, they have many statements from their early American prophets warning America about this conspiracy that they saw taking over the American government. So Mitt Romney should know about conspiracy, should be a believer in conspiracy. But basically, he's part of that clique of people who are praised because they make it in the world. And they feel like they're on a mission to save and bring their church out of obscurity, to bring their state out of obscurity and gain recognition of the world by kowtowing to the establishment, by impressing the establishment. That's what happened to ex-Governor Mike Leavitt, who got into one of the cabinet positions with Bush. It's what happened to Governor Huntsman, who actually did join the New World Order. You can't get to be an ambassador of China unless you are part of the system, because that's one of the most key ambassadorships in terms of managing, both the Chinese rise to power, which the globalists support, creating the best enemies that money can buy. And then, of course, you have Scowcroft, Brent Scowcroft, who's a Mormon, and Harry Reid. Now, these are a little different in the sense that these have never been active Mormons. They're really not believers. They only became active after the church showered them with affection because they or appreciation, and let them give speeches at Brigham Young University, praising them because they had made it to the top echelons in the world. But that, I see, is a major problem with the mainstream portion of the Mormon church of trying to pat Romney on the back for becoming governor, and not worrying about the compromises made to become governor of Massachusetts.
What do you make of Billy Graham, coming out and now giving his blessing basically to Mitt Romney? I mean, I see that as the establishment now kind of going, okay, maybe we can't beat him, so we'll give our little seal of approval.
Well, that's right, and that's why Henry Kissinger endorsed it. Henry Kissinger's born and bred in the establishment. In fact, he's probably second-level conspirator deep into it, and for him to endorse Romney has incited the right to think, he is, in fact, one of them. But he isn't an insider, and I'll tell you why. You're absolutely right. By the way, they're essentially trying to convince Romney that we're your friends, that you have won yourself our acceptance and you're into our inner circle and we can really help you. But Romney cannot be an insider, and that's because nobody gets on the inside without gross immorality of the heterosexual or homosexual variety. They prefer homosexual, like Obama.
I wanted to raise that. What about all these scandals of top BBC children's presenters, Sandusky, all that? I mean, whenever I do research, I just run into the elite, not just into, adult type stuff, but they're into like necrophilia, pedophilia. I mean, who are these people?
Well, actually, that goes back to the fact that this is a satanic conspiracy ultimately, and Satan deals and promotes people who have gross sexual anomalies and problems. And that's why Mitt Romney will never be allowed into the inner circle of the inside. I know Mormon CIA people who joined the agency early on who have told me, my brother was, in fact, the CIA, and when they get sent overseas, my brother was an analyst, a low-level economic analyst, and he touts that he was part of the CIA to brag his bio up a little bit, but in fact he was never into anything. But too many people say, if you remember the CIA once, you're always a controlled CIA member. It isn't true. There's a vetting process. Like my Mormon friends who, when I went in the military, they went in the CIA or the FBI. At some point, they get put in front of a compromising situation to test whether or not they'll be immoral.
Yeah, you talked about that. They'll send a hooker to the room.
Exactly. That's what they did. They were overseas. They sent hookers to the room. Were paid by the CIA.
Well, what is it about Texas? Because so many people, like when I've gone to family reunions and things, and places, but then I've done more research since then. so many of the people in my extended family, you know, great uncles, people like that, others. I mean, you'll be at a family reunion. There's like 20 CIA retirees there, and I guess when they'll say, well, they recruit heavily out of Texas, which is just strange. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but the point is, so many of them said, well, you know, it's very immoral, and I got out of it. So as you said, that, you know, they get out of it. I mean, I wasn't told this. My dad was, and I later asked him, and he said, yeah, but you don't want to know about that. I mean, I had a great uncle, he's still alive, who was an Army officer, and they recruited him when he was middle-aged and said, okay, well, now your final, you know, stuff you're supposed to do is basically deal drugs and kill people in Chicago, and he said no and got out. So you're right, there's a vetting. It isn't once in, always in. I mean, almost all these people that my dad's talked to, because, you know, they told him more, they all refused to be part of it and then got stuck in a desk job. So there's this continued thing going on, is my point.
Well, that's right. And as my buddy said, you know, I refused the prostitutes, and I never got promoted again after that. Now, what people have to understand, as part of my explanation, there's a dark side and a light side, a white side to the CIA, the DEA, the FBI, and they not only recruit heavily out of Texas, and that's not for the same reason they recruit heavily for Mormons. They recruit heavily for Mormons out of what Webster Tarpley mistakenly calls the Mormon Mafia, because they see a lot of Mormon agents in. And by the way, the Mormon Mafia that Tarpley refers to Howard Hughes hiring a lot of Mormon people for his security. And when Howard Hughes got a black reputation, they got a black reputation and were called the Mormon Mafia. But it was because they were predictable yes men, that Mormons who are taught to trust government, who are taught to trust the establishment, to become mainstreamers. That's, you know.
Why do they recruit out of Texas then separately?
Well, because Texas also has a good old boy reputation, and they are very good at getting Texans into the good old boy network, which is the dark side. Now, that doesn't mean...
No, I was about to say, everybody, they tried to recruit them all into really serious stuff.
That's right, because they think, you know, Texas also has a big Masonic connections where they use that good old boy network to get around traffic tickets and other things. And so the CIA has capitalized on that. They even have a annual roundup called the Good Old Boys Network, where they bring in all the various dark side operators from CIA, FBI, Secret Service, and you know, have a big carousing party and things. But it's important to remember that they recruit Mormons mostly into the white side of the FBI, and very few of them ever cross over because they are such predictable yes men to the establishment. And that's what Romney is. Romney's born and bred with that trust the government, make sure the government feels that you're friends. That's a point of view in Mormonism that's not shared by the constitutional conservative, which is about a third of Mormons. About a third, or, you know, just dumbed down, and about a third are pro-mainstream.
Very interesting perspective on all that, Joel Skousen, because obviously you're Mormon, so you can speak from within it. You know, expanding on this, and in a little bit of time we have left, you know, obviously they're both globalist puppets to one extent or not, but Obama does look very angry in these debates, like he's been told something, and that's what Lindsey Williams says from his source, who I know who it is. I mean, maybe he's giving him disinfo, I don't know, but that you know, that Obama's been told that kind of there's a power split, and that a lot of the establishment is going to go ahead and throw themselves behind Romney.
Well, that isn't true. You know, he's getting a lot of disinformation from his source, whether about the...
Well, who do you think's going to win then?
Well, the establishment clearly wants Obama to win. They do not want Romney to win. They are scared to death that Romney is a very smart businessman, will see things, illegal actions in the White House, and he'll stop being the overly ambitious, conservative, stupid compromiser and suddenly get a fit of principles. Romney is a principled person. He just doesn't see that there's danger in government. He doesn't want to see that there's danger in government. He is continually convinced that he needs to please the establishment, and that could change. That's the only basic difference. In other words,
well, I think the reason he went up in polls is people liked that first debate where he wasn't being the little friendly Eddie Haskell type and was being more serious on Obama. Yeah. People liked that more aggressive executive look.
That's right. Now, Romney is not, in my opinion, going to help us. In fact, he's going to hurt us in the conservative movement because he will end up talking people into compromises as if they're good things.
Well, that's what he said. He goes, well, I did want to restrict guns, but we compromised, and the hunters got something, and that was scary.
That is scary. He is not a very strong proponent of the Second Amendment, especially for the right reason, that is to defend against tyranny. He does not believe in that. And so he could compromise in that, though clearly we know we'll get worse things under Obama. Now, I don't happen to think that even if Obama wins, that they've got enough for two-thirds majority to pass any of these onerous UN treaties, but the threat is looming large. That's eventually what they're going to try to do. I'm just very, very concerned that, we're going to get 4 more years of Obama. I still think that people ought to vote on principle. I'm not intending to vote for Romney. I want to send a message to the establishment that we will not vote for the lesser of two evils. I would rather that a compromising Republican lose rather than to put him into office and have him convince so many more conservatives that compromises are good.
Well, overall, I think it becomes a distraction what president we get, even though there are importances, in different management structures that are behind each man. I mean, it's important, but compared to 8% turnout, local elections on average nationally, and 56% for national presidential elections, sometimes even 60%, people need to just take their towns over. People need to stop counting on Ron Paul, Joel Skousen, Alex Jones, G. Edward Griffin, whoever. People are always calling me, do this, do that. Look, I'm doing everything I can. I left this morning and my kids begging me not to go. I'm not, saying, oh, pat me on the back. I mean, I'm really making a sacrifice here. I'm very frustrated by other people not respecting themselves enough to see themselves as leaders. And I know everybody doesn't, have that spark of leadership, but a lot of you do. And a lot of leaders actually think it's arrogant to go out and speak up and engage. And it's almost like hospitality I've seen to let people run over you. And so what I'm going to say here is, folks, it's time to grow a backbone. I know a lot of you have it, and you've sat back because you're afraid of what you'll do once you start rolling. Well, look, this is not the time for sitting back or even half measures. And it's not the time to overcalculate everything when you first get going. So many people want to come up with a big plan they never executed. Just call into talk radio. Go into city council and speak about whatever issue. Go to the state legislature. Go meet your congressman or woman when they're at the local grocery store doing a meet and greet or church. Go, if your church is pushing anti-gun, anti-family crud and bringing in consultants and all this federal takeover, get up and say, hey, this church started to take federal money. We're being controlled. Get aggressive, because we have to be the salt of the earth here. And, and it's other things. Help the Salvation Army. Go out on the day before Christmas or whatever and help the homeless. There's a lot of little things you can do. Just bring light to the world, because the darkness wants everybody to think there is no light. I notice I get attacked by the globalists and their COINTELPRO constantly saying I'm not real or I'm not good. Well, let me tell you something, folks. I'm certainly not good. And I've tried to stop, and I've quit any tobacco products over the years so I can be healthier off and on. I've been chewing tobacco since I played baseball in high school, and, drink beer and stuff sometimes. I pretty much quit doing that until I go out to a party or something. That's why I try to just never go to parties. But don't let the system sit there and tell you you're bad. Oh, because you're a patriot, you shouldn't make money, or oh, what are you doing getting up at city council giving us your views? They'll laugh at you to make you feel small. So many good people who are good in their hearts, we sit there and feel like we're bad because we have a conscience. And so we don't do anything because, well, we're bad. No. If you love good, you're good. You need to go out and fight evil. And the reason I get into this is it's something I see in so many really good people. They won't go out and get engaged because they're so humble. They think of it as bad to go out and even expose evil because they're not perfect. Well, then how could they go out and fight evil? And I'm kind of boiling this down here, Joel, of something I've noticed while so many good, well-spoken, powerful people never step into the power they have that God's given them because, they think it's uppity. I mean, how would you quantify what I'm saying, or do you disagree?
No, it's it really is difficult for most people to get into a fighting stance because they, we live under illusions of prosperity, illusions of peace, and it's dissipating out from underneath our feet. People would rather somebody else do it, like you or I, get out there in the front rows and do it themselves. And to a certain extent, you've got to have the stomach for it. You've got to have a certain level of courage You've got to have a wife or children that support you, knowing that you're at risk. You're at risk. I'm at risk. But somebody's got to take this risk. And I'm not for pushing everyone to do what we do. I'm for pushing those that have the power, that have the guts to do it, to get out there and be more active. Because ultimately, and my position has been, the most risky position you can take is to be a believer in conspiracy, both of theory and of facts. We won't always have all the facts because it's secret. But this is the only thing that's going to save us, and that's why I'm a great promoter of your site, Infowars.com. I go there every day to make sure I haven't missed something because you guys are so good at picking up things. And I think it's extremely important. The only way that we're going to win is to convince enough people in this society that there is a massive conspiracy against liberty here, and that it's not a matter of trusting a milquetoast, middle-of-the-road Republican to save us. They're not going to save us. Only a person who understands the nature of the conspiracy is going to be able to get inside and clean house, as difficult as that may be. And, Ron Paul, for all of his faults about not seeing conspiracy because he didn't want to see, still had absolute integrity, and I knew that he wouldn't have stood for any fault or all, any illegal actions in government. They would have had to kill him, in fact, because just the principled man inside government can do a great deal of damage to this conspiracy.
Exactly. A lot of times just not compromising and just doing the right thing. I mean, look, we're going to save society by not cheating on our wives. We're going to save society by not cheating in business. We're going to save society by being good. And, it sounds cheesy out there. Well, that's because the system's made it cheesy. Let me tell you, the children, the society collapsing, all the terrible things that are happening, the devil has sold evil as if it's fun. And the truth is, folks, it's not fun. And so just speaking up, saying no in little ways will give you more courage. I just know there are a lot of amazing people out there who are eloquent and who are strong and have financial means as well, who go, oh, no, I don't want to, again, it's not even out of fear. They just, I've talked to these people. It's more of, well, that's kind of arrogant to go shove myself into things and get in people's face. No, it's not, ladies and gentlemen. We have to go confront these people. Let me tell you, when you confront these globalists, you confront their minions, they get freaked out. They're scared of us. And you have to get to the point where I know it's embarrassing when they're scared of you because we're not bullies, but they're the enemy. They've got to be dealt with, and we've got to be aggressive with them. And it doesn't mean, we're like corrupt cops enjoying people scared of us. We have to, drive these people out. And it comes up, and the thing is, you have power. People don't realize how much power you've got when you stand for what's right. And so just take action. In closing here, any other tidbits you'd like to add? Joel Skousen with us. We're going to go to break with a special report Dan Badani did on flu season and all that propaganda. We're going to come back with about 30 minutes of Christy Ask Alex, because we didn't finish that yesterday. And then we've got another big special report here. We are now 48 hours, 16 minutes into transmission here with Joel Skousen, Infowars, Moneybomb.com. I tend to get overwhelmed with information, Joel, and then I get here on air and just go in all directions and get mad and blow up. But, to quantify this, I've known Ron Paul for 17 years. I've talked to him, off air quite a few times. I knew Rand, probably one of the first people to ever get him on, about 15, 16 years ago. He's running for re-election. And Ron Paul was busy. He'd just been on. And I said, what about somebody at his office? And he goes, well, Rand's going to start doing interviews. He's campaigned before, but not really done interviews. Would you like Rand Paul on? So this is like 14, 15, 16 years ago. I'm one of the first people to ever interview Rand Paul. I privately on the phone, at his house in Kentucky, I'm not bragging, but I said, listen, you're going to win this. I can tell in my gut. And you've got your dad's name. If you just live up to that, you could end up being president. And because I knew it in my gut. And I said, do it. And it was my listeners from Texas that actually went up there and formed the core of his campaign. So then I got hurt and got mad, not even so much at him coming out and endorsing Romney, because I understand overall, he wants to get accepted by the Republican establishment. But I tried to explain to him on and off air, I said, you're going to lose your credibility with people that have supported your dad, because it's one thing if you don't, support the Republican Party if you think it's better, but, getting out there, I go, this will, once you start compromising, it's over. But what really makes me mad is some of his head campaign people, some of Ron Paul's, who even wrote articles when we were at Bilderberg saying you shouldn't be at Bilderberg, libertarians, this makes us look bad, when Ron Paul's exposed Bilderberg on this show. And then taking money from Peter Thiel, the Bilderberg guy, and Bilderberg trying to bring them in for their own brand. Ron Paul's not part of that. And I understand what Rand thinks he's doing. But finally, he's kind of getting away from Romney on the neocon stuff, stepping back because I think they realize that, hey, just because the devil put his arms around you and it was warm doesn't mean he's your friend. And so I'm torn by it. But I think the thing that makes me maddest about it is that Rand let his surrogates, who are running things, Jesse Benton and that Hunter guy and others, come out and actually go after Ron Paul's base that recognize the integrity. And I think it's a bad miscalculation, even from a cold-blooded stance. I know Rand Paul, better really than Ron Paul behind the scenes. And Rand is a good guy. Rand knows about the New World Order and the Bilderberg Group. And until just 6 months ago, he would talk about it. Now when reporters bring it up, he walks away. And I don't know if they dug something up or what, but it is very painful to see Rand Paul beginning to get sucked in by the dark side. And I have to say it, I mean, again, it's not just that, they endorsed Romney or, they didn't go to Paul Fest or, whatever. I mean, I'm seeing really, I can just look at, and I know behind the scenes too, Jesse Benton and some of the other guys. I mean, some of these guys are grasping political operatives now working for mainline Republicans. And to see the whole Ron Paul revolution sucked away by a bunch of piss ants, to use the term, excuse my French. I mean, it's disgusting. And I'm ranting now, but do you have any comments on that?
Well, they haven't turned Rand Paul. He hasn't been guilty of anything that could blackmail him, but he has succumbed to the fear that if I ever utter anything that could be construed as being in favor of conspiracy or understanding this globalist conspiracy, that I'll be blackballed. In other words, he's starting to bend to the very obvious political doctrine, mainstream doctrine, that in fact you cannot win if you touch conspiracy, and he will. And even Ron Paul bought into that. I mean, Ron Paul actually believes in conspiracy, but he cannot. He doesn't want anyone to brief him on him. He doesn't want to know too much for fear that he'd have to lie if they ever, in the media, ask him a direct question about it. And Ron Paul wants to remain honest. But we cannot win this battle without understanding the issue of conspiracy. We have to be credible about it. In the next year or so, I'm going to be doing a new video on the modern history of conspiracy in government. And it should be a real blockbuster. I'll be talking to you about that later, Alex. But anyway, we need to continue to fight the way that you're doing. I really appreciate what you're doing. And people need to be careful not to try to push too much at people who are resistant. We need to find the remnant. We need to find people who sense that something's wrong, not spend our capital and spin our wheels trying to convince people who are keeping their head buried in the
sand. By the way, I agree with you. When I was calling on people to get involved, I meet incredible people from great families, successful in business, who have that electricity in their eyes. You can tell, like you look up to them. People I've known for years, this is a really good person. They have a good aura, to them, not being a cult of, you know what I mean? A really good spirit. Yes. And I'm like, you need to go fight. And it's not that they're even afraid. They're like, well, me, I'm not again, it's a humbleness, and it's this humbleness that's holding them back, and I don't understand it.
Well, it just takes a lot more courage, and to a certain extent, Alex, it takes a certain innate fighting spirit, and everybody doesn't have that. So I would be cautious that everybody isn't going to be able to fight the way that we fight. I think it's sufficient for people who can't to help support us financially, and to support our work and to spread the word to other people. But I think there's something that everybody can do, and they need to all come up another notch in drive to be able to pursue what they are capable of doing.
I agree with you. In the 3 or 4 minutes left we've got, I just want to point out, ladies and gentlemen, it's up. And again, I do so much. I'm not whining. It's just that's my excuse for getting things done haphazardly. I apologize to Joel for taking 4 or 5 months to get this out, but in a way it turned good. The wine got better. Because it's a film now. It's not just a presentation. Strategic Relocation. You can order it at InfoWarsStore.com. That's part of the all of it going into the money bomb. Once that's added in, it's going to boost it quite a bit. It's now over $300,000, which Sounds like a lot. I mean, again, I'm like a kid in a candy store looking at all these satellites I want to get onto and the audiences they reach. We could reach just tens of millions more a week that have never heard us. People that don't even really have internet, churches all over that have, satellite. We can use the internet to promote it to those people so others can tell them about it. It's amazing. So your donations are coming in. InfoWarsMoneyBomb.com. I want to thank you. But strategic relocation, the book, The Secure Home, the book by Joel Skousen, all available at InfoWarsStore.com or InfoWarsMoneyBomb.com has links. And now, today, great job of the crew getting it up today because I knew these were coming in. I'm like, well, go ahead and get it up now since he's on the show. InfoWarsShop.com. You can pre-order that. It'll ship out in 2 to 3 weeks. Pre-orders start now. InfoWars has it available right now. We produced it, Joel Skousen, and it's really a film. In fact, I'm going to redo the cover when we reprint. We've printed, 10,000 copies, which will probably go very quickly. That's why we have to say it ships in 3 weeks. I have to get part-time people in just to be able, when a new film comes out, and then rotate them out on top of the 6 people we've got working in the shipping department back there. So 10,000 of these printed. That's what it is. It's like paper, but it's a DVD. Really high quality. I'm really proud of the film. And the guys, we shot from 5 different cameras. That's what took so long to edit it, was to get it all together and have the best cameras and tweak the audio and everything. But strategic relocation, you can go read about it. It's the film that goes with the book. So get them both right there at InfoWarsStore.com today or 888-253-3139, 888-253-3139. And when the next printing comes out, I'm going to call it a film, as it's called Alex Jones Interviews Joel Skousen on Safe Places and How to Secure Your Home. And it's InfoWars.com presents Strategic Relocation, edited by Rob Jacobson, graphics Darren McBreen, music Will Jones, produced and directed by Alex Jones, featuring Joel Skousen. We're going to add featuring Joel Skousen on the next print. I don't know how that didn't get on there, but it doesn't matter. He's not egomaniac. And so we will get that out to everybody. And again, it's powerful. And it was he was in town, close out to where I live. And I don't want to get into he didn't tell me the details, but, building a fortified location. And he's so busy, though, now. Joel, I think that's something we ought to talk about in closing, because that's key intel without giving away any secrets. Everybody I talk to in bomb shelter construction or secure home construction, I know a guy outside Austin, a guy worth hundreds of millions, who's built one of these $3 million concrete jobs under, out by the lake. I mean, this is a big deal, and they're not doing it for 2012. I've had some shelter makers on. They go, I think it's 2012. I mean, clearly it's geopolitical in nature. It's military in nature. It's nuclear in nature. Tell us about the Ozarks, giant elite compounds being built. What is going on, Joel Skousen?
Well, it's really true. I mean, for years, of course, ex-CIA and government people have been building major shelters in the ski resorts of Colorado and other places, knowing that a major nuclear war was coming. And it used to be that then, in terms of the people I dealt with, it was only conservatives, arch conservatives, who felt that something was coming, didn't have a lot of money, would really have to work under the do-it-yourself aspect. And now people with major funds are coming out of the water. I'm just swamped with not only consultation but design work all across the country for people building high-security residences and retreats. But it's interesting to note, and that's why people really need to get my books, is that a lot of people make big mistakes in terms of making it too high profile and making it look like a fortress, which is just like waving a great big flag of "come and get me." People need to
you want a hidden hobbit hole, don't you?
That's right. You want it to look completely conventional. You want to make sure that everything you have that is sensitive is concealed, so that if somebody walks through the house or pillaging comes through, you can leave the door open and they still can't find what you have. And even if government comes to search, which they will someday under the confiscation laws, they can't find what you have.
Executive orders.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I believe that we have more time, Alex, than a lot of people who are claiming imminent collapse. I still don't think people ought to procrastinate the relative good times we have to build these things and to have equipment that's available. And someday it's not going to be available when you need it.
I agree. Strategic relocation, the film. Guys, let's add on the shopping cart the film. I think we can, documentary film and presentation. I think we can call it documentary film. Because I made that decision like 2-3 weeks ago when it went to be mastered 2 weeks ago. And I was like, this is a film, what we've ended up making. And we might even just say directed by Alex Jones, because, I mean, people tend to respect something more if it's a film. And, I mean, it really is more of a film than it is a presentation, but it is mainly Joel sitting there talking. But there's video clips and documents and just so much research we did into backing up everything that Joel talks about. Strategic relocation. Alex Jones interviews Joel Skousen on safe places and how to secure your home. And again, great job to the weekend crew who've been here all week in there getting that up on short notice. I told some of the graphics guys when we knew it was done and completed, I said, go ahead and tell them to go up with it as soon as the trucks are coming with the DVDs. And I guess that didn't get relayed, but it's up there now. Pre-order, and we'll just ship it out to you, say, in 3 weeks. So that'll be, I don't know if it's the 20th, by the 7th, 10th or so of November. Hard to believe the election is almost here. Specifically, Joel, on the rioting, we just picked up on a bunch of people on Twitter and Facebook threatening to riot or kill Mitt Romney. The White House, through their surrogates at Think Progress and others, said we were making it up, basically. Since the Secret Service has responded and admits there are thousands of these going on. I mean, I'm not even saying that's going to happen so much, but why were groups allowed to push that? And then when I talk about it, they imply it isn't true. And do you have any concerns if Romney is elected? Or it sounds like you're saying you think Obama's going to get elected.
Yes, I think they want Obama. They're going to pull out up to 10% of electronic voter fraud in this to make sure that he's elected. But I think that what we saw was a wave of hate response from the left threatening Romney, and obviously the Secret Service should be getting after them whenever anyone on the right hints about something violent. They send stormtroopers into their house. They won't do that with these people, but I don't think there's going to be a major October surprise. I think they're going to be able to get Obama. They were going to use an attack on Iran as the possible October surprise to boost Obama's re-election. I don't think they're going to have to do that, and they're not ready to attack Iran yet. So I think we're going to see a normal election, no major crises before then, but they'll pull out the electronic voting fraud to make sure that Obama wins. Now, let me just say before I close, though, that Romney is ahead in the real polls. They are going to have to pull out up to 10% in order to get Obama reelected because the phony polling has been understating Romney's support.
Yeah, well, there's so many other questions I could ask you. We're going to go to break here in a moment and come back with an Ask Christie and then another special report going over 48 hours here in the Money Bomb, just because we got behind with other guests, keeping them longer, so we're about an hour or so behind here. Speaking with Joel Skousen of World Affairs Brief, while you're talking, I have so many questions, and I think of the next question. I'm trying to remember what my other question was for you, but we do. I'm
sure we could be on another time together and discuss things.
What do you make of the 1.6 billion bullets?
Oh, well, there's a couple things. My son works for a military contractor, and first of all, he said those contracts are for maximum amounts, don't actually represent the amounts actually ordered, which will be less than that. For contracting purposes, they always pick some pie-in-the-sky feature. Now, that isn't to say that they aren't doing this. The Department of Agriculture and IRS have no business even putting that much quantity in their orders. The point is, I think either they're trying to curtail the market on ammunition to drive up the price.
That's what gun insiders, big company owners have told me. That's why they'll buy up any amount of Barretts they make, 50 cal out of Tennessee, that it is a directive to get these out of the hands of the people.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. But still, there's a long-term agenda with prison camps and other things that are being built to be able to take down American people. The quantity bullets are more than enough to kill all Americans 3 times over, so I'm not sure that...
So what is the scenario with the prison camps then? Because it is now in official Army manuals, the term re-education camp. Yeah. Why would they even use the Soviet term?
Well, I think it's important to realize that they are going to round up all distance. I don't think it's imminent. I don't think martial law is imminent. I think it's going to come when this major attack comes. They're going to swoop down and say there are people among us who believe that we were responsible, that we didn't see this threat coming, that we purposely didn't prepare, like they believe in 9/11 as a government. And those people are enemies of the state. They're not supporting our troops and need to be rounded up. They'll task Americans to turn in their fellow Americans and put them in re-education camps. And I think it's very real, not imminent, but very real, and that we need to prepare not only to fight that, to make sure it doesn't happen, but prepare to
Well,
go
that's right.
underground if it does happen.
I agree. The only way I see them really being able to mass round up is if a bunch of cities get nuked, people will get so scared, and then they're not going to care if the troops get chewed up going after people, because that's part of the larger plan. This is my final question, is what I meant to ask you. Again, I know you defined it somewhat, but the three different power blocks, obviously, you know, they're trying to push Russia into something or trying to invite the attack. Obama saying get rid of nukes and things, obviously, just to cover. Again, who do you really see winning, you know, in this master plan? I mean, is the Anglo-American establishment the most powerful?
It is. There are three major power blocks: Russia, China, and the Anglo-American establishment, the globalist conspiracy as we know it. And the Russians and Chinese both would like to capture a new world order for their own self. They are temporarily aligned. I believe that during this war, when Russia and China join together attack, China stays on the eastern seaboard protecting Russia's rear, that China will turn against Russia sometime during the new world, the attack on the West, and the West will make a pact with China to give them military aid and other things if they turn against Russia, just as you know, the U.S., the West made a pact with the Soviets to turn against Hitler. And so I think it's going to be, Russia will be eliminated in the Third World War. China will become the new Cold War enemy, and that will justify, very important point, will justify justify the United States and Europe of maintaining this new world order organization as a militarized world government.
Yes.
Because of the threat of China.
Well, George Orwell, who was Eric Blair, British intelligence, you know, Indian police before that, worked for the communists, then worked in BBC and propaganda. You know, his character, Winston Smith, you know, at the Ministry of Truth, that's him. And he actually wrote a lot of essays and talked about this. But he said that book is basically what Ingsoc English socialists wanted. And in the book, we understand they'd put the communists in power. They'd created these enemies, but there was conflict. And the government was staging terror attacks, you figure out. There's total surveillance. And in that, that's what's happened. Russia's basically gone. All it is Airstrip 1, England and the U.S., and a kind of destroyed, demilitarized Europe against Asia. And it's crazy. He wrote that in 1947, 48. And then now the world you're talking about is a 1984 world.
That's right, and I think my prognostication will be correct someday. People will see that I'm vindicated.
What do you say about Orwell, though? Because he's a post-nuke, Anglo-American, Russia destroyed versus Asia world. I mean, he was at the highest levels of Ingsoc. Do you think that's why he knew that?
I think so. You know, they have plans far in advance of what they've even told other people. I mean, the people at the very top. I personally think, as I say, there's a satanic component to this conspiracy, and I think they get revelation from the dark side about future things.
Amazing. All right, Joel Skousen, and I'd like to talk to you soon. In fact, maybe during this break, I'll come out and ask you about that video project. That's exciting. I'd like to work with you on that. That's a good idea.
Great.
And I want to see what you think of this project. We're going to send you a disc, well, Monday, because these just came.